The antique mirror with its tarnished silver frame vibrated violently on the wall. It wasn't due to an earthquake or any noise from outside. It trembled with an invisible frequency, a cold energy swirling within the cramped North Hollywood studio apartment. Mia clutched her phone, cold sweat beading on her temples. The screen was still live streaming, the front camera reflecting her pale face illuminated by a single red candle. To those who dwell in shadow, her voice trembled, repeating the words she had been taught, "Make me seen in the light of the world." As the last word escaped her lips, a dry snap echoed. A hairline crack shot from the top right corner of the mirror, spreading like a ghostly spiderweb. Mia flinched backward, her heart hammering against her ribs. The candle flame flared violently, then extinguished, plunging the room into near-total darkness, leaving only the cold light of the phone screen. And then it happened. It didn't start with a single view. It started with a flood. The numbers on the TikTok app danced manically. 1,000 views, 10,000, 50,000, all in less than 30 seconds. The phone grew hot in her palm, buzzing incessantly with a storm of notifications. Likes, comments, shares, new followers. The notification sounds overlapped, morphing into a deafening roar, an electronic chorus of the attention she had so desperately craved. 200,000 views. It had surpassed the threshold of a normal viral video. This was an anomaly, a system glitch, a dark miracle. Mia stared at the skyrocketing numbers, a dizzying cocktail of horror and exhilaration swirling within her. She had done it. The pact was sealed. Just last week, Mia's life had been a loop of quiet desperation. Her apartment was a testament to deferred dreams, with clothes strewn about, a professional ring light collecting dust in the corner, and a notebook filled with failed content ideas. For 2 years, she had poured her heart into becoming an influencer. She'd danced to trending songs, done makeup tutorials, vlogged her uninteresting life, and even attempted cringeworthy comedy skits. The result was always a deafening silence. Her latest video, after 24 hours, had a measly 23 views, and she was certain half of those were from herself. "You're trying too hard, Mia," her best friend Zoe had said over the phone, her voice carrying the brutal honesty of someone who truly cared. "People can feel it. You don't have that it factor." Mia had thrown the phone onto her bed. Zoe's words twisting a knife in her insecurities. Maybe Zoe was right. Maybe she just wasn't interesting enough, pretty enough, charismatic enough. That night, sitting amidst the rubble of her broken aspirations, she had cried out in hopelessness, "There has to be a way. All those famous girls, they must have a secret." Just then Zoe knocked and entered without waiting for an answer, 2 iced coffees in hand. "Listen," Zoe said, plopping down on the edge of the bed. "I just heard something super weird." Mia looked up, a flicker of curiosity in her tired eyes. "You know Lexi Glass, that girl on TikTok, who was a nobody?" "Yeah," Mia mumbled. "Now she's everywhere. Fenty deal, invited to the Met Gala. It's like she came out of nowhere." Zoe leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Exactly. And the rumor is, she did something. She went to New Orleans. They say she visited a voodoo priestess in the French Quarter." Mia let out a dry, hollow laugh. "A voodoo ritual for more views? Come on, Zoe, be serious." "I swear," Zoe insisted. "They call her Mama Ilara. People say she can open the paths of presence, that she can make the spirits of the city notice you. And ever since then, Lexi just blew up." Mia fell silent. The name echoed in her head. Mama Ilara. A wild, dangerous thought began to sprout in her mind. "Where does your famous old lady live?" she finally asked. Zoe shrugged. "I'm not sure. Somewhere deep in the French Quarter, a hard-to-find place. But hey, Mia, be careful. That's not something to joke about." Mia nodded without replying, but in her eyes a small flame had been lit. "Maybe that's exactly what I need," she whispered to herself. 2 days later, Mia was on the earliest flight to New Orleans. The city's thick, humid air enveloped her the moment she stepped out of the airport. She took an Uber to the French Quarter and began her search. She wandered through the narrow streets asking timidly, "Excuse me, do you know someone named Mama Elara?" Most people just shook their heads, looking at her with wary eyes. Finally, an old street vendor with sharp eyes pointed her in the right direction. "Down that alley," he said quietly. "Look for the house with the iron gate shaped like snakes." Mia followed his directions, her heart racing. At the end of a cobblestone alley, almost hidden by ancient magnolia trees and Spanish moss that hung like funeral veils, she saw it. A dilapidated two-story colonial house with peeling paint and an intricately wrought iron gate in the shape of two intertwined serpents. She hesitated for a moment, took a deep breath, and knocked. "Come in, child." A deep, raspy voice called from within. Mia pushed open the creaking door and stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of incense and dried herbs. The only light came from dozens of candles placed on small altars illuminating glass jars filled with strange objects, cloth dolls, and worn tarot cards. An elderly woman sat in a velvet armchair stirring a small bowl of seashells. "Hello, are you Mama Elara?" Mia asked shyly. "Were you expecting someone else?" she replied without looking up. When she was finished, Mama Elara finally raised her head. Her eyes were deep and black, looking at her, as if they could see into her soul. "You want to be seen, don't you?" Mia's jaw dropped. How did you know?" The old woman gave an almost imperceptible smile. "Mirrors talk, child, and yours has been screaming for a long time. You want presents. That is the worst thing to want." "The worst, why?" "Because those who want to be seen often forget how to see themselves." Mama Elara answered calmly. She stood up, took a whitish powder from a small leather pouch, and sprinkled it onto a flat stone. "If you want to be seen, I can open the way for you, but this path demands a price." "What do I have to do?" Mia asked, her voice barely a whisper. That night, Mama Elara led Mia to St. Louis Cemetery No. 1. The whitewashed stone tomb stood starkly in the darkness, illuminated by the full moon. They stopped before an isolated, unmarked grave. The old woman placed a wooden bowl on the ground, poured some rum over the headstone, and whispered words in a language Mia didn't understand. "Kneel at this grave," Mama Elara commanded. Mia obeyed, her knees trembling on the cold stone. "Repeat after me. To those who dwell in shadow, make me seen in the light of the world." Mia hesitated, but the old woman insisted. "Say it or go back the way you came." "To those who dwell in shadow, make me seen in the light of the world." Mia repeated, her voice breaking with fear. Instantly, a freezing wind swept through the cemetery, extinguishing the candles Mama Elara had lit. The old woman stared at her for a long moment. "When you go home on the following night, light a red candle. Place your phone before a mirror. Smear some of this powder on your forehead," she said, handing Mia a small cloth pouch. "And speak the words again. Then you will be seen." She added with a mysterious smile, "But remember, child, no light is free." And now, standing in her darkened apartment, the phone a living, convulsing thing in her hand, and the crack in the mirror like a ghostly eye staring back at her, Mia was beginning to understand what that price might be. The number on the screen had surpassed 1,000,000, and it showed no signs of stopping. She was being seen not just by the world, but by something else, something ancient and hungry, that had been awakened from the shadows. The next morning, Mia was awakened not by her alarm clock, but by the incessant vibration of her phone on the nightstand. It was buzzing like a trapped bee, the screen constantly lighting up with hundreds of new notifications. She squinted in the morning light filtering through the blinds, her mind still foggy. The scene from last night replayed in her mind like a wild dream: the candle, the mirror, the whispered words, and the ominous crack. "It must be an app glitch," she mumbled, trying to reassure herself. She reached for the phone. Her hand trembled as she unlocked the screen. The TikTok app immediately appeared. The numbers were not a dream. Last night's live stream had reached 3.2 million views. Her account, which had languished at 417 followers, had skyrocketed to over 500,000. Her inbox had exploded with thousands of comments and messages. "Oh, my God," she gasped, her chest tightening. She refreshed the page. The numbers kept climbing. 550,000 followers. She let out a laugh, hesitant at first, then breaking into a peal of excited, almost hysterical laughter. She jumped out of bed, twirling around the small room, a feeling of euphoria coursing through her like an electric current. It had worked. Whatever it was, it had actually worked. She was no longer invisible. Just then there was frantic knocking at the door. "Mia, open up! Are you in there?" Zoe's panicked voice called out. Mia rushed to open the door. Zoe burst in, her own phone in hand, her eyes wide with disbelief. Did you see? You're everywhere. Your video is on everyone's For You page. People are talking about the mirror girl." I know, Mia yelled. And they hugged, jumping up and down like children. "What did you do?" Zoe asked, pulling back and looking at Mia as if seeing her for the first time. "I mean, it's brilliant. The lighting, the angle. There's something so different." Mia hesitated for a second. The image of Mama Ilara and the cold cemetery flashed in her mind. "Nothing special," she lied, trying to keep her voice casual. "I just decided to be myself. No more forcing it." Zoe burst out laughing. "Well, yourself just broke the internet." But deep down, Mia knew something had changed. It wasn't just the numbers. When she looked in the bathroom mirror, the crack was still there, a thin silver thread. And when she looked into her own eyes, there seemed to be a strange light, a confidence she'd never had before. The following days were a whirlwind. The followers kept pouring in. Her phone rang off the hook. Brands started reaching out, small ones at first, offering free products in exchange for a post. Then bigger companies with offers of paid partnerships. For the first time in her life, Mia saw 4 figures on a brand contract. Then 5. Money began to flow into her bank account, a stream she could never have imagined. The first change was her apartment. She left the cramped North Hollywood studio for a modern penthouse in West Hollywood with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and perfect natural light for filming. "My space needs to reflect my evolution," she explained to Zoe, who looked around the empty apartment overwhelmed. Zoe didn't dare say anything. She saw her friend had changed, a little distant, but clearly happy, so she let it be. Mia quickly became addicted to this new life. Evenings at chic restaurants, like Catch LA or Nobu designer outfits, impromptu trips to Las Vegas or Miami, just to create content. But behind every posted smile, every perfect picture was an expensive bill. Because to shine, one had to maintain the light, and the light was very expensive. The first expenses were small things, a new camera, high-end skincare products, the latest phone. Then came designer clothes, handbags, 5-star hotels she filmed for her fans. Every time she earned money, she spent it immediately. Not out of thoughtlessness. No, it was more powerful than that. A voice whispered inside her, "Show them more. Keep their attention. Don't let it drop." And then, without really meaning to, she let another world into hers. Powerful, wealthy men, sugar daddies as other influencers called them. Some invited her to dinner, others to Dubai, Paris, or Switzerland, and not just for content creation. They gave her expensive gifts, promises, and easy money. Mia told herself it was just a mutually beneficial exchange. "I give them presents, they help me out a little. Nothing wrong with that," she repeated to herself, trying to ignore the gnawing unease in her gut. One evening, Zoe waited for her at a fancy Beverly Hills restaurant. Mia was late. A few fans recognized her at the entrance, the flashes of their phones going off. "Well, you've become a real star," Zoe whispered as Mia sat down. Mia gave a tired smile. "A star, yes, but an exhausted one. At least you're enjoying it, right?" "I think so." Zoe spoke gently. "You're spending a lot, aren't you?" Mia looked down. "I have to. People only follow what they dream of having. If I stop showing them, they'll leave." "So what do you get out of all this?" Zoe asked her question, touching a deep, empty place inside Mia. Mia looked up surprised by the question. She was about to answer, but her phone buzzed. A new notification. A luxury French perfume brand had just offered her a six-figure ad campaign. Her eyes lit up. "You see," she said, holding the phone screen towards Zoe. "This is my life now. I can't slow down." Zoe sighed, a flicker of sadness in her eyes. "Just be careful, Mia. Sometimes we mistake the spotlight for a wildfire." Mia just smiled, a radiant but distant smile. "Trust me, Zoe. I have everything under control." But as she looked at the sparkling champagne in her glass, reflecting her perfectly made-up face, she couldn't help but wonder. Was she controlling the light, or was the light beginning to control her? The light Mia had bought with a whisper in the dark burned brilliantly for exactly 2 years. 2 years in which her face reigned on countless phone screens. Her name became a brand, and her life was an elaborately staged dream coveted by millions. She had believed it would last forever. She had believed she was in control. But borrowed light always has an expiration date. The decline didn't come like a storm, but like the quiet turning of the tide. At first it was small, almost imperceptible. A video that didn't hit 1 million views in the first hour. An engagement rate that dropped by a few percentage points. A post about a trip to Santorini that didn't create the usual viral effect. Just a slow week, she told herself, scrolling through the analytics on her tablet. The algorithm changed again. But then 1 week became a month. The numbers didn't just plateau. They began a noticeable descent. She tried harder, posted more frequently, spent more money on extravagant outfits and more luxurious settings. She flew to Switzerland for a photo shoot with a watch she couldn't afford, only to see the video underperform an old one of her making coffee in her penthouse. A cold, sharp panic began to creep into her mind. The digital world she had conquered seemed to be turning its back on her. The brands noticed too. The once enthusiastic emails were replaced with silence. The lucrative contract she expected to be renewed was canceled with a vague explanation about a shift in marketing strategy. The people who had once vied for her collaboration were now pouring money into new faces, younger stars, who seemed to effortlessly capture the rapidly changing trends. Her light was dimming and the moths were flying off to find a new flame. And then the supernatural signs began to reappear. One morning, standing before the antique mirror she had brought from her old apartment as a trophy, she noticed the crack had spread. It was no longer a thin thread. It had now branched out, forming jagged veins like lightning frozen on the glass surface. She shivered, a sense of dread rising in her throat. Worse was her reflection. No matter how perfectly she did her makeup, no matter how flawless the lighting in the room, the person in the mirror looked tired, exhausted. Her eyes lacked their sparkle, and there were faint dark circles beneath them that no concealer could hide. It was a bone-deep weariness and exhaustion that sleep couldn't cure. Her body was betraying her as if it were paying for her fame with its own life force. That night, in desperation, she decided to do something she hadn't done in a long time, go live and speak honestly with her followers. No script, no product placement. Just her and the camera. "Hey everyone," she began, forcing a warm smile. "I know I've been a little quiet lately." She looked at the live viewer count. It hovered around 5,000. 6 months ago, it would have been 50,000 in seconds. The comments scrolled by. Some were greetings, but many were critical. "You look so tired. What are you selling now?" "Boring." One particular comment made her freeze. "Where did the light in your eyes go?" She abruptly ended the live stream, her heart pounding with shame and fear. She sat in the darkness of her expensive penthouse, feeling more alone than ever. She scrolled through her old videos back to when it all began. And then she stopped on the video. The first one that went insanely viral. The one filmed in the dark with the flickering candlelight and the freshly formed crack in the mirror. She looked at her own face in that video, terrified, but also full of naive hope. That girl had been willing to do anything to be seen. That girl had no idea the true cost of what she was asking for. A single tear rolled down Mia's cheek. "It's crazy," she whispered. I was more real when I was a nobody. A few weeks later, after a major brand finally sent the official email terminating her ambassadorship, Mia made a decision she had sworn she would never make again. She booked a flight to New Orleans. When she arrived at the house with the serpent gate, nothing had changed. The city was still humid, the magnolias still stood tall, and the air still smelled of mystery and decay. She hesitated for a long time before knocking. This time there was no immediate answer. She called out, her voice trembling, "Mama Ilara, it's me, Mia." The door creaked open, and the raspy voice she would never forget called from the darkness. "Come in, child. I've been waiting for you." The old woman was still sitting in the velvet armchair, her back straight in the exact same position as 2 years ago, as if she hadn't moved at all. Her black eyes held a terrifying calmness. "You shone so brightly," she said evenly. "And now you've returned. Everything is falling apart." Mia cried the words, tumbling out in a torrent of desperation. "My views, my contracts, everything." Mama Ilara nodded slowly. "That is normal. The light I gave you was but a single breath. If you want it to burn again, you must feed it." Mia didn't understand. "Feed it how?" The old woman looked directly into her eyes, and for the first time Mia saw something other than serenity, a cold, calculating glint. "By giving. What you have received must be paid for." "Paid for, but I've already lost almost everything." "No," Mama Ilara said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I do not want your money. I want a sacrifice, an offering, something or someone you love." The blood in Mia's veins turned to ice. "No," she stammered, taking a step back. "No, never. I didn't sign up for that." "No one ever does," the old woman said, her eyes nearly closed. "But deep down, everyone knows that no light shines for free. Every fire needs fuel, child." "I refuse," Mia said, finding a last ounce of strength in her horror. "I would rather lose everything than be a slave to that." Mama Ilara opened her eyes, and they were completely void. "Then, my child, prepare to return to the shadows." Mama Ilara's words were not a curse but a prophecy. When Mia returned to Los Angeles, she felt as if an invisible curtain was descending upon her life. The shadow she had fled for 2 years was now returning not as a predator, but as an old friend, familiar and inescapable. The voodoo priestess's promise came true with ruthless speed. The digital world, which had once celebrated her, now treated her like a ghost. Her posts received a fraction of their former attention. The comments dwindled, and the collaboration offers vanished completely. It was as if an unseen hand had erased her name from the algorithm, severing the connection that bound her to the world. Within a few months, the collapse was complete. Mia had officially returned to the shadows. Life became cruel quickly. With no more lucrative contracts, the cash flow dried up. The bills for the penthouse, the luxury car, and the extravagant lifestyle began to pile up like tombstones for her dead career. She was forced to make painful decisions. The car was repossessed. She sold the designer handbags, the expensive clothes, piece by piece of the life she had built, just to pay the rent for one more month. Finally, the inevitable arrived. She left the West Hollywood penthouse, leaving the glass walls and million-dollar views behind, to move into a small rented room in Koreatown, a place even worse than her first studio apartment. The antique mirror, its crack now spread like a dense spiderweb, was one of the few things she took with her. It stood leaning against the wall in her new room, a constant reminder of her pact. She tried. God knows she tried. She attempted to go back to simple, authentic videos, hoping people would reconnect with the real Mia. But nothing worked. She was no longer a rising star or a fallen legend. She was simply irrelevant. The fans who had once called her queen had found new idols to worship. New, younger faces had taken the light she left behind. Sometimes people still mentioned her, but only as a cautionary tale. "Do you remember Mia Vance? Oh, the girl with the dream vacations. What happened to her?" "No idea. Just disappeared." And it was true. Gradually, Mia erased herself from social media. She still posted but rarely, and her videos only garnered a few hundred views. She simply didn't have the energy anymore. Because the decline didn't stop with her career. It was attacking her body. The signs began with an extreme fatigue and exhaustion no amount of sleep could cure. She slept for long hours, but always woke up feeling drained as if something had siphoned her life force during the night. Then came the shortness of breath, the sudden dizzy spells when she stood up too quickly. Zoe, ever loyal, visited her one evening. "Mia, you look so thin," she said, concern etched on her face. "Is everything okay?" Mia managed a pale smile. "I'm fine. Just need some rest." But they both knew it was a lie. One evening she tried to film a video, just a simple message for her few remaining followers. "Hey everyone, I know it's been a while, but I just wanted to say I'm doing okay." She stopped looking at her reflection on the phone screen. A gaunt face, sunken eyes. The light was well and truly gone. She deleted the video without posting it. A few weeks later, she fainted while walking home from a part-time job interview. At the clinic, the doctor diagnosed her with severe anemia, a deficiency of iron of energy of life. Her body was slowly shutting down. She would often lie in bed scrolling on her phone, watching the other girls. The girls who were living the dream she once had. They laughed, did their makeup, showed off new clothes, and Mia would just smile sadly. She'd whisper to the empty room, "It's their turn. I had my share of the light." Everyone had forgotten her, but she was still there, a ghost of her former self. She found a small job at a coffee shop, living a simple, anonymous life. She didn't post anymore, but sometimes late at night she would re-watch her old videos. It was like watching a complete stranger, a radiant girl full of energy, completely unaware that her light was being fueled by her own future. Once a young customer at the coffee shop squinted at her. "Excuse me, you look really familiar. Are you Mia Vance?" Mia offered a gentle smile, one she hadn't used in a very long time. "I was," she said, "but that was a lifetime ago." The world kept spinning and the digital spotlight continued to shine on new faces. But sometimes in a conversation, in a nostalgic story, the name Mia Vance would come up. The legend of the lost light lingered, a cautionary tale about the price of fleeting fame. And in the small room in Koreatown, the mirror still stood. The crack had spread across the entire surface, fracturing the reflection into 100 tiny pieces. Mia no longer looked at it. She was afraid of what she might see. Not a gaunt face, but something else. Something looking back at her from the other side, from the shadows, patiently waiting to collect the rest of its debt. Years passed. The city of Los Angeles, changed trends came and went like waves, and new social media stars rose and fell with ever-increasing speed. The digital world had almost completely forgotten the name Mia Vance. Mia was now a woman in her early 30s working at a small used bookstore in Larchmont Village. Her days were spent in the quiet company of dusty pages and the smell of old paper. The chronic fatigue remained a silent companion, but she had learned to live with it. She was thin. Her hair lacked its former luster, and there were fine lines around her eyes, the marks of a life lived too fast and paid for too dearly. She no longer owned a smartphone. A few years prior, after a sleepless night spent unconsciously scrolling through her old videos, she had smashed it and switched to a simple flip phone. She had severed the last cord connecting her to the world that had nearly destroyed her. She was no longer seen, and for the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. The antique mirror was still with her. It was kept in her bedroom, its face turned to the wall. She couldn't bring herself to throw it away. Some ghostly bond held her to it, as if a piece of her soul were trapped within its fractured glass. Sometimes at night she thought she could hear faint whispers emanating from it, but she always forced herself to ignore them. One day a young girl, perhaps 16, walked into the bookstore. Her eyes were bright, and she held her phone as if it were an extension of her own arm. She was filming a video, speaking excitedly to her invisible followers. "Hey guys, today, we're exploring some vintage bookstores in LA, she chirped. Mia watched her from behind the counter. She saw herself in that enthusiasm, in that burning desire for connection and recognition. A familiar ache tugged at her heart. The young girl approached the counter, camera still rolling. "Hi, can you recommend a book that's really cinematic?" Mia looked directly into the lens without thinking. For a moment the girl froze. Lowering her phone slightly, she squinted. "Oh my God, you look... Can I help you?" Mia interrupted, her voice calm but firm. "No, nothing. It's just, you remind me of someone," the girl said awkwardly, quickly paying for a book and leaving. That night, Mia couldn't sleep. The encounter had stirred the ghosts she had tried so hard to bury. She sat on her bed staring at the back of the mirror. The whispers seemed louder, clearer. This time they sounded like Mama Alara's voice. "No light is free." Driven by an impulse she couldn't explain, she stood up and turned the mirror around. The glass surface was now a maze of cracks, barely reflecting anything at all. But in the very center, there was a small, unbroken shard of glass. And in that shard, she didn't see her own reflection. She saw another room. A dark room, lit by a single red candle. And there, kneeling before a mirror identical to her own, was the young girl from the bookstore. The girl was smearing a white powder on her forehead. Mia gasped in horror. The girl began to repeat the words, "To those who dwell in shadow, make me seen in the light of the world." As the girl finished speaking, a new hairline crack appeared on the mirror in Mia's vision. And she felt it. A sharp, cold pain shot through her chest, as if a piece of her own life force had just been ripped away. She gasped for air, leaning against the wall for support. She understood. She finally understood. It was never a one-time transaction. The light wasn't created from nothing, it was transferred. For a new flame to ignite, an old one had to be extinguished. She hadn't just lost her fame, she had become the fuel, her life force. Her light had been slowly siphoned away over the years to feed the next rising star, the next desperate girl who, like her, sought out Mama Alara for a miracle. She was part of a horrific cycle. In the mirror, she saw the numbers on the young girl's phone begin to dance manically. The girl laughed, an excited peal of laughter identical to Mia's own from so many years ago. And as Mia looked closer at her own reflection in the surrounding fragments, she saw something even more terrifying. Behind her, looming in the shadows of her room, were other figures. Dozens, perhaps hundreds of them, faint and gaunt, the faces of those who had come before her. The extinguished flames. They were all staring at the scene in the mirror, permanent slaves to the pact. Mia screamed a silent, soundless scream and stumbled backward, falling to the floor. The final debt wasn't money or the sacrifice of a loved one. The final debt was herself. She wasn't just meant to return to the shadows. She was meant to become part of them, a perpetual power source for the fleeting dreams of others. She sat there trembling on the cold floor as dawn began to break outside her window. She didn't look at the mirror anymore. She didn't have to. She could feel the eyes watching her from within the glass, and she knew she would never truly be alone again. Across the city, a new star had just been born, her light brilliant and dazzling. She had no idea that her light was kindled by a flame slowly dying in a small room where a forgotten woman had just realized that some debts can never be paid off. They can only be passed on.